Okay, good morning again, everyone. This is about my second time on WebEx, so there may be a little bit of technical difficulty, but we'll do our best. Kim wasn't able to join us today. She's out of town, and we've got some backup, so we'll get started, but thanks for bearing with us as we did. Typically, I do this presentation or a variation of it in person and with a little more time, so normally I'd like to do a little bit more by way of introduction. We're going to skip that today in terms of getting to know you and your experience in writing grants and using demographic information in that context. But I'm going to make the assumption that all of you have had at least some experience in grant writing. That may not be completely accurate, but I just want to encourage you to chime in because I've given this quite a bit of thought, but I'm certainly not an expert, and I think we all have experience to share. So please do feel free to chime in as we go. And if you would, for just a minute, take a second and type in some of your concerns into the chat box when it comes to applying for grants and using demographic information, or just any thoughts that you have about doing it. And we'll give that just a second.
So, anyways, let's get back to what. Feels so bad. But that's the way it goes.
You can still hear someone, too, as we're typing. If you would, please mute.
I didn't hear earlier.
There are no concerns out there?
Maybe they're so
busy
typing.
Good. Angela, thank you. Locating accurate and relevant information. Anyone else? Using the most current information. Good point.
Linda Tripp is here.
Okay, Linda.
I can hear you. I'm still trying to get onto the computer part, though.
Okay, and Linda, if you would, please mute your phone.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other concerns? We'll give it just one more second. While you're doing that, I just want to point out that I have both Robin Blakely Armitage and John Binks with me today. Also, thank you.
Just explain. If you don't mute your phone, everyone, what happens is that all the noises that are coming from your people that have signed in get set back off noise. It makes it hard for us to respond without distraction. So, phone.
Okay, is everyone hearing? I did hear that we were echoing. Can you hear us okay now? Using updated information for specific census tracts, creating boilerplate descriptions of county regional demographics, and the most current information. Okay, so it sounds like we are sounding better, and we've got a few thoughts, and we will try to address questions throughout the conversation. Again, I still need to mute. One of the things I want to touch base on is some key points that I think we heard in the last two presentations for those of you who were on about things to keep in mind as we use demographic information. I just want to review some of the roles that I think we mentioned play in grant writing, and then we're going to spend the bulk of our time on the grant writing process, thinking about your funder as your partner, and then quite a bit in terms of reviewing the proposal component and emphasizing the role of demographic information there. Okay.
Melanie, are you having trouble with this webinar?
It sounds like everyone's just like talking.
Yeah, I hear everybody talking at their desk, but I don't hear anything.
I know, that's why I'm like, all right, I'm going to come back in 2 minutes. If you want to watch it with me, I'm just watching it back and back
I'll come back. And I was just going to come see if maybe it was working where you are, because it's not working on me.
out a mandated program, and then they kind of, they kind of shine and they become part of these different programs back in their own communities and becoming leaders and program developers and collaborators. So, I just said that last night. So, things that happen.
Yeah, Heidi, can you hear me?
All right.
If you could give us 5 minutes back, that would be helpful, and we apologize for this.
No, today was last week. I didn't go. So, any news? Anybody know anything?
They're even aware.
I put in my notice at the library, did I tell you? You said you were going to. Yeah, I did. At the end of April. Yeah. So, have you met Hillary? She might have been around the last time I said, actually, there's a book I wanted to pick up, so no, I haven't really. Yeah, but she's very good. And she's, changing a lot of things, which I think is good, too. But she wants to get a tech person. Well, no basic technology, but we're not, we don't have our phone in front of us all day going like this, like some kids do. Anyway. Very different with that bar, She's so comfortable to be with her. Yeah, she was outrageous. Yeah, oh my gosh, she should have given me so long last time. So you put it was your... Yeah. So, a lot of people are very ambivalent right now. I just decided, I might, like Barry and I might go down south next year, they'd have to, have to leave anyway, they'd have to get somebody. Maybe they get somebody younger, I don't know. See what happens. It's not a huge salary, so
they can hear you. So you see how that little thing
Yep.
lights up? That's how you know that
Okay.
you're talking.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now? And are you ready for this to get on? I'm so sorry. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so we are going to hopefully get going here. Let me get... Okay. Let me just get this reset up, and then... Okay. Now you have the slides as well, I hope. Okay. So, not knowing where we've been coming in and out, I'm going to start back with learning objectives. So I'm sorry if I'm repeating something, but I want everybody on the same page, and we'll move from there. Okay. So again, I'm hoping that by the end of this presentation, you will be thinking about grant-funded projects as a partnership between you as the project coordinator and the funder. That you will also see the grant writing as part of a process that extends through the life of a project. So it's not just, it's a key component of it, but you're really thinking about the broader project throughout it. That you'll better understand and continue to be thoughtful about where demographic information can be integrated into this. And as I mentioned before when we started, I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in thinking about this, but I have given it some serious thought, and I see all of you also as experts in this process, so I hope you'll chime in as we go along. And again, I want you to really be thoughtful about how demographic information can strengthen the proposals and your overall project. Okay, hoping we made it past that. Finally. Okay. So again, the focus is really on the grant writing piece, but how demographics can come into that. We're going to talk a little bit about the types of data that might be relevant, and we have both Jan Vink and Robin Blakely-Armitage here who will hopefully chime in with respect to where we can find that information in the resources that they shared last week. I just want to give some thanks quickly to colleagues who have helped shape this presentation over several iterations when we've given it before. Okay, so what are the key things that I think it's important to keep in mind, and this is from the previous two sessions. First of all, it is important that when we use data, we're thinking about it in a particular context. So throughout the process, as we're integrating data into it, we want to think about situating the data that we're using. And really what you're doing in a grant proposal is telling a story. You're addressing an opportunity or addressing a need, and in order to help the folks who are going to be reviewing your proposal and your partners who are going to be working with you to implement this project, you want to be thoughtful about having them understand that story. And so it's really about using data in that context. And again, I think when I think about data, I get frustrated because I don't have the exact data that I want to show a particular thing as I'm writing a proposal. And I think what's key is that you can use data in a broad context to set that general stage, and hopefully you have opportunities to pull some things locally by polling the constituents that you're working with, your target audiences, to get them more specific. So remember, data does have limitations, but everyone who has access to that data shares those limitations. So we use the best thing that we have. We just recognize those limitations. Okay. So just a quick comment about what are some of the roles that we as Extension educators play in working with or writing proposals. Sometimes we're the primary author. I think that's more and more frequently, but a lot of times we also play support for our association overall. We might be pulling together a proposal. We might be supporting a partner agency. And we may be a pre-submission reviewer, so somebody else has written a proposal, but they've said to us, you've worked in this area, could you help take a look at it? And we may review other proposals. In all of these cases, it's important to be thoughtful, again, about where data fits. Are we using it the right way? Is it helpful to us in telling the story that we want to tell? Okay, so let's go into the grant writing process. Here's just a quick overview of what that really involves in the process. And we'll just go into some detail. In developing a concept, and I really, when I'm thinking about grant writing and working with funders, I really think it's important to have your concept first. A lot of times I think we are having to go out and say, I need funding, here's a grant opportunity, how do I take advantage of it? It's much better to have that concept up front, have it kind of as you're starting to move forward. And then you go and look for some funders to support it. You may need to tweak it to meet funders' needs, but it's really important that we don't go too far off track in that process, because in doing that, we're really getting sidetracked and taking us off of our mission as we go along. But in developing that concept, I think, and this ties into this next slide in terms of finding the right funder, it's really important to think broadly. And an example that I'll give you is I had contact with a museum just the other day who was interested in serving local foods, and they're a locally focused museum, and they wanted to find funding to support a consultant who will be coming in and developing their menu. And she said, do you know where there's funding for this? And I said, I don't know specific funding to hire a consultant, but I would think about this broadly in the context of the other things that you're doing. Is there a way to connect it to some of your exhibits? Is there a way to connect it to other activities that you have at the museum, which then opens up the possibilities for a broader set of funders? As you do that, it also then, I think, requires us to think more broadly about the different types of demographic information that we might draw on. So it might open us up to a whole broader array. In finding the right funder, it's really important to do some background search. What are their goals, their motivations? And I encourage you really to take some time, even though it requires time, to do that, and even find out what their funding record is. For example, if it's going to require a huge, huge process and they only fund a few people, is it really worth the trouble of going through it? Of course, read the request for proposals. That should be obvious, but sometimes we don't take the time to do the details that we need to do. And then do a little background search. What I think is interesting is sometimes in the information that they share, they provide some actual demographics about their applicants and their grantees, and it's worth looking into that to see how do I compare in that context. So, you know, again, it depends on the funder whether this information is provided, but it can help, I think, provide us with a better understanding of, am I really a good fit? Is my project really a good fit for this partner? And I should step back and just say the reason I encourage us to think about funders as partners, and we'll carry on with that theme throughout this, is that they have a goal and you have a goal. You're doing the work and the labor to meet that goal, and they're providing the funding, but you really need to be working together throughout. And, you know, in talking to the executive director of a community foundation about this, from their perspective, that's the way they really look at what they fund as well. So I think it's just, again, important to keep that in mind. Okay, so going into the writing stage and submitting the proposal, it's really about establishing a connection with that partner. You're going to provide the information that's requested, and I highlight requested because oftentimes we want to share lots of information. We know our projects in detail, we're excited about them, and we want to give them lots and lots of information. It's important, again, to really stay focused. We want to seek clarity from the funder. If we have questions about should this be included, does this make sense, go to them, and most of the time they usually say, questions, ask us. Do that and just establish that connection. It's important in the process to ask funders if they do review a draft, if they're willing to take advantage of it, but have friends or colleagues take a peek, because if they can't understand what you're saying or the point that you're trying to make, then there's a good chance that the funder's not going to be able to do it as well. It's absolutely essential that you get it in on time. Again, that should be obvious, but we know folks who get dinged because they haven't done that. Stay in touch with your partner throughout the process. Ask for a confirmation of receipt. Don't be a pest. This sounds silly, so don't ask questions just for the sake of questions and thinking you're establishing a connection, but certainly ask questions that are pertinent and let them know you're being thoughtful about the process. Okay. So again, this is just going through the process, but if your proposal is rejected, check in with the reviewer again, what was wrong, what was right, and how could it be more competitive. And sometimes they do share that information, and sometimes they don't have time to do it, but if they do, it's certainly worthwhile. Okay, so on the other end, if your proposal is accepted and you start your implementation, Be sure to fulfill the requirements and honor the commitments that you've said that you would do in being granted that funding. Provide the reports when they've asked for them. If you can't do it on time, make sure you're in touch with them to find out or get an extension. Submit the vouchers, do what you said to do, or if for whatever reason you get in the middle of a project, you're assessing where and how it's moving forward, you're finding something isn't working and you need to change plans, run that change of plan by them and make sure it fits with what their goals. Again, it's just thinking of them, treating them as the partner that you'd want to be treated as. I also think it's helpful to provide updates, invite them to attend an event or one of your activities, and then, it's even good just to write thank you notes. This really went well. We appreciate the funding. Okay, so then project evaluation. We talk a lot about that, and I think it's required to be incorporated more and more into a funding process, but it's good just for us to know what's going on with our project. So it's really important to know what's important to you that you want to evaluate, but it may not be the same thing that the funder wants to have evaluated. So in your evaluation process, make sure that you're being accountable to both. Again, address reporting requirements. What have they asked you to share with them? Document that the money was well spent, and that's, I think, particularly important if you have had a change of plans, so they funded you for one thing, but in the process you did a little bit something different. Be sure to make sure they understand, again, remind them why we went this route and why this was still a valuable project. And again, the on-time submission. All right, so I just wanted to run through that briefly just as an overview of the whole process, and now let's get into more, and you'll see, I hope, in this next section where demographic information comes in each of that. Okay, so responding to the request for proposals. And this is going to, again, really detail that the process of both writing the proposal and then moving forward. So for those of you who may be newer to grant writing, the request for proposals is really announcing the purpose and availability of funding. It identifies the granting organizations, your funders' interests, and helps you get to know them. It prescribes a process for seeking funding, what you have to go through, and it provides a structure for proposals. It's really important to keep in mind that it may be complete and very, very detailed, or it may be really confusing, and so you may have to dig in and say, what is it that what they're really looking for? And again, that's a time to touch base with the funder if it isn't clear. One thing that it does sometimes do is note previously funded projects. Here's what we've done in the past, and this is maybe the first place where you start thinking about where you can find some demographic information and how do what I know about the demographics of the audience that I'm working with fit with, or the audience that I'm serving, fit with the support or the audiences that my funder has previously funded. Okay, so typical components of a proposal or the proposal summary, an introduction to the organization. Usually they're asking for a problem statement or opportunity statement with a needs assessment. What are your objectives, your methods of design, your evaluation, future funding budget, and of course some appendices. And the items outlined in blue are typically where I think of drawing on demographic information. Okay. So the proposal summary is going to typically be 2 or 3 paragraphs. It's the key points that are necessary to communicate what it is that you're going to do. This is your first impression, and in a second we'll talk about why that's really, really important. But you want to be crisp and clean. I think what's important here is you can use data at this point, and it can be really helpful. I think if you think about it in the context of really capturing a reviewer's attention. However, because it's such a short quick, crisp thing that you're writing at this point, and you want to make some key points, don't feel compelled to dig into the data at this point. Okay, so the reason why it's got to be really, really crisp, and this is something that some of you may know Neil Schwartzbach, but this is something that Neil pointed out to me. Who has a sense what the typical average time that a foundation officer spends reading a proposal. Just take a couple of seconds to give me a guess or two. Throw it in your chat box. Okay, so I'm seeing 20 minutes, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Okay, check this out. That dumbfounds me, and I want to get to that point, because when I review them, I don't typically spend just that amount of time, but I think, how do they do it? But the point is, it's really, really important to make that good first impression, and if data helps you do that and really says, hey, check this out, this is why you should be thinking about us instead of the 50 other grants that you're looking at, this is where to do it. Okay, the next thing is that you're usually asked to provide an introduction to your overall organization, and it should be you're thinking about your organization in the context of its relevancy to the goals of the request for the proposal. What is it that you're going to be doing and the granting organization? So there's probably lots you can share about your organization, but you don't want to go and share all of that. It's really you want to key in on what's of most relevance to what you're proposing or to the funder's goals. And again, this may be where, because you're talking about your mission and you may be talking about that you give a broad overview. Here's the target audiences that we typically serve. Here's the types of information that you might want to share about them, drawing on either the profiles or the materials from Headwaters that gives the funder a sense to understand who you are serving overall and what the types of things that you do there. Next is your problem, and I keep saying opportunity statement because we typically address it in terms of a need, but we also talk about opportunities. So what is it? You're just going to say, this is what this proposed work that we're doing fits with the philosophy of our mission and our goals and also yours. And here's the need or opportunity that we're just addressing. And it's going to include, ideally, a profile of the target audience that you're serving. So that may or may not be your broad audience that you just provided some additional demographic information or a broad context for. You may be having to hone in. And I think this is interesting relative to some of the concerns that you expressed at the beginning about having the current data. So I think from the materials that have been shared in the other two sessions, there's a wealth of information out there, but you may need it on an even smaller basis. And you'll remember that some of that information, I think particularly in the Headwaters report, if your unit that you're looking at, so maybe a neighborhood, you have less reliable information. So you may want to supplement that information by doing a focus group or a quick survey of your target audience. So you can say, remember, here's the broad context, I've got the demographic information to prove it, but we've had a conversation with a few folks in our community, and out of that number of people that we talked to, here's what they said, and here's why we're moving forward in this way. So again, I think you've got the bigger picture with some of the information in the profiles that were shared earlier, but you may have to go a little bit farther with that. Again, it should be clear and well documented, and as we just talked about, it can be from secondary data or your own needs assessment. So just as an example, you might say something like, we've looked at farmers market use over the last several years, and we know that it's been very helpful to the participants in it. It's provided access to food that they haven't had before, but we know it's underutilized based on, in that case, you're providing, we know that there's this many people in poverty with low access to food in the area, but we know we're only serving a small percentage of it based on the number of people that we count coming to the market each week. We know that they will benefit from increased participation and awareness based on this research, and so here's where we're going. So that's an example of how you can combine something that you're looking for with some of that information that's broader from the profiles. All right, so The next thing is really about the project objectives. What is it that you want to accomplish? What are the specific tasks that you're going to help you accomplish those goals? It's important also to talk about the expected results as a result of doing these activities. And then you're wanting to relate those objectives and the outcomes to the specific criterion of the grant program. In terms of methods of design, it's really about the tasks that you're going to be using to achieve your objectives, and it's really, really important, I think, to be clear about this, because it's easy, I think, sometimes for us to say, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to have happen, but knowing how we're going to make that happen, particularly with the amount of funds that we're being given, is really, really important. And I think it's important to really justify why we're using particular methods as we go along. So, for example, it's going to cost us a little bit more to do a phone or a door-to-door survey, maybe versus a web-based survey, but it's well documented that the target audience that we want to work with doesn't respond to written surveys. So this is why we need additional money or funds for this. Okay. So the next thing in terms of other important objectives, the methods and design components, you want to include a timetable so they have a sense of how you're going to get it done in the time allotted, and personnel. It's really, really important with the personnel that you're not just throwing up a bio that is really general. You want to speak specifically to the qualifications of those folks that are going to be working on the project with respect to what it is that you're doing with that particular funder, that you're doing in that particular project. Okay, project evaluation, it should include your outcomes and how they're going to be measured, and this is another, I think, space where we will be using that demographic information. Again, that provides us some baseline data, and I think statistics are particularly helpful here, speaking to trends and helping us know percentages and that kind of thing. So, for example, increased participations in farmers market, we said might be measured by a counter, and then we're following up with additional counting afterwards, and then thinking about interviews that can help speak to the changes. But if we have some baseline data that provides us with information about what that access is, we can then talk about after how that has changed. Okay. So does anybody have thoughts? Was anybody else on the last two sessions and speak to where you might get some of this information on? When Kim and I talked about this presentation, she said, can you give specific examples? And I decided not to go back to those and give specific examples because in some ways it's really going to depend on your project, what it is that you're going to pull from each of the profiles. But does anybody want to weigh in and say what types of information they could see drawing on from the profiles based on the areas that they work on? What would you want a funder to know about your target communities that you're working with? Okay, so somebody just wrote in and mentioned public health. Poverty rates. Okay, the census. Go ahead.
Everybody's writing to everyone.
Some of them are doing it privately. Educational attainment or lack thereof, a local needs assessment. Jan and Robin, do you guys want to speak to what within Headwaters or in the profiles where they would find some of this kind of information? So I'm just thinking about what are in the different pages of the different content. So certainly educational attainment, workforce sectors.
Occupational and occupations and industry concentrations in different areas and how that's changed over time is available in Headwaters. Jan, a lot of that is also available in your county profile.
Okay, on the county level, I have information on that. A couple of those things like educational attainment, like poverty rates.
Yeah.
on the county level, so not on the local level, but it might give you some idea of the data that is available. Most of the data, I hope I was good at giving references where I got the data from. Some of the data might get you a step closer to the source of the data. It might also be available on the geographic level you are interested in.
Right.
So, and I think again, so if we can only access the information on the county level, we can set the stage by saying we know that in this county or this neighborhood, based on our county profiles or running what we've run in the Headwaters report, which of course goes back to the census and other information, that this is the current state of things in this county. We know that we live in a particularly in a neighborhood that's particularly impacted by not having a lot of access to foods, and so we have followed this up by specific surveys, and so that you can have this mix between this bigger picture that we have the data for and providing some supplementary information. But the point is that you're using this information to really be clear about what you know and to say, we've done our homework, we know that there's an issue, we know that there's an opportunity here, we want you to understand it, and here's why we need this support and want to implement this project. But again, you're really telling the story and providing the context. Anything you guys want to add to that? So I think it's a fit between this information that we can get from the profiles that we've been provided, again, and doing some a little bit of background homework. And I want to emphasize that you don't feel like you have to implement an entire neighborhood survey, but just even talking to a few people and being able to share the results of that, or doing a quick survey at the market where you're asking people, for example, how many friends do you know in your neighborhood that attend this also, but just something that helps you tell that more localized story. Robin, go ahead.
Well, I just saw that there was an example shown up on the chat box that said immigration. So possibly this person's looking for data on immigration, and it just so happens that Jan and I collaborate on a publication series called the New York Minute, and I believe we did profiles on Latinos in New York State as one example of immigrant group that is very diverse, much more diverse, and I guess the point in that is that it's not just state-level snapshot, but in those publications we point to resources and often county-level data that people can access. So you're saying, okay, this is interesting for upstate, but I want to see what's going on in my county. So in those publications we point to county-level resources. And this month we're coming out with one that looks at who is moving into New York and who's moving out, their characteristics, and so we'll be pointing people to resources that they can do some further digging. So it's not just the profiles, it's not just Headwaters, but when you see a publication that covers a topic and it's a narrative, if it's a good publication, it should also point you in the direction for more resources, for more data. So there's other ways to get at these issues too.
Exactly. And I think even just citing that research is important, that we know, and you can cite that publication and say, this is what we know about this bigger picture, and here's how, given that bigger picture, we're focusing in on this particular aspect of it. Okay. So a lot of times in the funding process, as you're writing a grant, a funder wants to know how the program's going to survive into the future if it's not, if it's something that you aren't just a project set in time, that you have a definitive beginning and definitive end, that you're planning on this project moving forward. They're going to say, how will it happen without their funding? And so it's really important just to be thoughtful about how you're going to do it. Maybe it's a fee-for-service program. Maybe you have volunteers that once it's off the ground, you'll have built up a volunteer base that's going to keep it going. Maybe there's other types of program fees or local funding that'll support it, but just to be thoughtful about that process. I also think it's important, though, that if you're going to say we're going to have it paid for locally, remember how to think about that in the context of the demographics that you've just provided. If the demographic information that you're sharing is a picture of an area that's very impoverished, the funders may be saying, how are we going to expect that you're going to carry on this project when you've just told us the story? On the other hand, if it's a well-off area that you're working with and you've documented that, then yeah, okay, this makes a lot of sense. Just going back to expenses as you're writing your proposal, be realistic. I've been in reviews of proposals that have not had a realistic budget, and it is a reason that they have been rejected. We've said, this is a great project, but there's no way they can do it on the budget that they've proposed. It just doesn't make sense. Consider all of the different aspects of what goes into your project. There's a list of some of those: personnel, materials, supplies, communications, travel, evaluation costs, and you really want to be detailed. A budget is a budget. We know it's going to change. It may not be the exact path that your plan follows, but when they say travel, they're asking you to think about it typically down to the mile. What's the current cost of reimbursement per mile, and why or current cost of gas, and what are you planning for? Don't forget matches that you're included. That's really, really important. If you have money to put towards it in some way, or other resources that you're putting towards it, I think that reinforces this concept of partnership. We're in this for the long haul, and here's what we're contributing. We're not just asking for your money. And just don't forget that subcontracting may have certain administrative costs that you'll have to include beyond just the cost of the services. So you're going to follow the outline that hopefully that it's provided. Sometimes they aren't provided, but if your funder is giving you a particular outline, make sure that you're following it. If not, again, detail the categories that make sense for either your association, your organization, or with specifically the project. So just there's some things to keep in mind about that. Appendices. Oftentimes they give you an opportunity, because you have limited space in your proposal. They only want a certain font size and so many pages and so much space between each line of text. So they'll allow some appendices, and you don't want to include appendices just for the sake of appendices, and we've seen that before, which gives, I think, the funder a sense that the applicant is really just kind of throwing everything in there. They haven't really thought this out well. So you want to include just those attachments that are really going to help strengthen your proposal, and this might include more demographic information where you can go into more detail if it would help make your case. Key personnel and resumes, so this is going back to documenting that this person really has worked in this area before and would be is the reason we've chosen this person to do this. Letters of support sometimes go into the appendices. References that you couldn't fit into the proposal, you've linked to them. Don't just throw in the name of the author, but actually provide them the full text. And then sometimes in the back with appendices, they might require conflict of interest or other forms. So but again, I think that this is another place to tell your story through demographic information if it helps really make your case. Letters of support, sometimes they're not allowed or required. If they are permitted, they're good to have. If you have a collaborator that's going to be receiving funding and you're having them include the letter of support, make sure that it's a statement that states what the collaborator will do for the proposed work for the money that's requested, and tell a little bit about what that collaborator is again. So, and have the collaborator say, I'm contributing this and I'm happy to be contributing this, so you're making it clear the role that they're going to play. And then you may have letters from your target audience. So I'm a farmers market participant that knows most of my neighborhood hasn't been involved in this, and I really think that they would benefit, and here's why. Okay, so I feel like I've absolutely rushed through this, and I'm sorry we didn't have more time for engaging. Had we not had the issues in the beginning, I planned to bring everybody in a little bit more, but here's just some final points to think about. So again, your funder is a partner. It's someone who chooses to fund you because they support your goals. Think of treating them, it goes back in my mind to when we were kids and you do unto others as you would have others do unto you in that process. So stay in touch with them. The funder really wants to know that you know the area you're working in, and demographic information is really a key part of making that clear. Again, telling the story that you want to tell and saying, I know what I'm talking about here. And I think the other key part of this is that combining this partnership approach with solid fact-based information not only makes for a stronger proposal, but it does ultimately make you more informed about the project that you're implementing. So I think it's really, really important, and I know that as we've talked with folks out in communities, with educators, and with the folks that we're serving in communities, one of the things that we constantly get calls for is, I'm writing a proposal and I need some information about my community. And I hope that if you haven't had a chance, or if you did participate in the early webinars but haven't had a chance to go back and really take a look at all of the information that's there, I hope you will do that and think about the ways that you can use that to strengthen your projects. So, any questions? Anything else you guys want to add?
If you're not familiar, if you don't have a chat box showing on your screen, we can actually stop sharing the PowerPoint, in which case their chat box will come up, but I don't want to do that if you still have slides.
No, I think, let me just show one more slide and then we can do that.
Some people don't know how to do that.
Okay. Okay. So just one other thing, that I understand that there is the site for under professional development with CCE that hosts some of the resources that we've created for this series of webinars. And I just wanted you to know I've put one up there on other grant writing sources. It was developed for our Cornell Municipal Clerks Institute, so there is a focus on a target audience writing for municipalities, but I think a lot of the information is very relevant. There's some just general grant writing tips there that I encourage you to take a peek at if you're looking for more information about this. Okay, one of the questions was, how would I find available grants for my topic more easily? You know what? I will add to that. There's a list of just general grant sites. So, for example, there's Grant Action New York, I think, that provides a large list that comes out of, I think, state grants that are open to different projects. So maybe we can list a couple of those sites up on that, so I'll do a little bit of research about general access. Certainly there's a federal government website that lists all of their grants, and they've really streamlined that process. Depending on what you're doing now, too, the consolidated funding application in New York State through the Regional Economic Development Councils, depending on what you're doing, has brought several funding agencies in New York State together to offer funding opportunities. So that's a good question, Deborah, and we'll try to get a list of some of that stuff out. Also, related to health, nutrition, and obesity prevention, another one that comes to mind is the Farm to School program. I don't know if they're still doing it, but Cornell's Farm to School program used to list funding opportunities related to nutrition. So, any other questions? Thank you, Nancy. So that if you don't have your chat box up, Jana Hexter has a great new free box, Grant Writing Revealed, and the listserv with great tips and resources. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I am going to turn off the presentation and stop sharing it so that hopefully the chat box will come up for everybody. And see if we can pull that out. Can we pull it out?
Since Jan and I are here, this is Robin, if there's any questions about any of the demographics that we presented and demographic tools and resources and how that might fit in with the grant writing, we'd be happy to answer any of those questions.
And I'll just throw in my email if anyone has any follow-up questions, because again, I had planned to spend a lot more time with that, but I don't know. Kim actually does have on their site, I think she was going to post that as well, a little bit more information about grant writing and grant writing resources. So Robin was just asking if CCE had that, and I do think there's some information on grant writing under the professional development website, and she was going to share that as well. So I'm sending this. There was also a question, if we're searching for specific demographics and need help, can we contact you?
Sure.
So,
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes, yeah, obviously, we'd love it if you could first check out the county-level profiles that are on the PAD, the Program for Applied Demographics site, as well as maybe run the Headwaters reports and see if they're there. But if you're having trouble finding additional data or interpreting what you see, absolutely contact us. We're trying to build capacity here. But we're interested to hear how it's working or not working for you.
okay, everyone. Oh, thank you for sharing that again, Nancy. So in follow-up to this, I will try to provide a list to links that I know of that share a lot of grant writing materials. There is also a foundation, a collection of foundations, that grant sources that provides for all of the foundations that are connected to that network. So we'll get a link of that to you as well. There may be a fee, I think, for accessing that site. And I'm not sure if Cornell's library provides that, but we'll just double-check what's available through CCE, and then I'll get you a list of those as well. Okay, I think if there are no more questions, I want to thank you again and apologize one more time for the technical difficulties. What may not have been clear at the beginning was that it would really be a focus on the grant writing process, but then tying in the demographic information in there and where it fits, and that was in part that Kim felt like just some sort of overview on grant writing would be really helpful too. So I hope it served these purposes, and again, apologize for the technical difficulties. Thanks everyone for staying with us.
And maybe I think what we'll do is we'll ask Kim to edit the recording so that if you found the webinar useful once we got our technical issues straightened out and you'd like to revisit it or send it on, I think we'll be able to provide a cleaned up version that doesn't take you on our little technical journey the first 15 minutes, but thanks.
Yes, and the PowerPoint will be available, and it is posted on the CCE site, or should be shortly. So, and we'll get these other resources out there as well.